Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Silver Lyming. I'm grateful to be here. I have with me another fantastic guest as always, and I've been doing a little chatting with her ahead of time. Carrie Perry is here, and I met her at her TikTok. She hosts an event. I don't know, are you still doing these events actually as I'm announcing these?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay, yeah, good. But what I had said to her was when I met her, I was just so grateful for her energy because that was still when I was very sick. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And just to have her to kind of encourage and follow along because she also runs Sam Spoon's Foundation. And then she has a podcast, Chick to Chick, that she does. But I noticed you launched both of those back in 2018. So I applaud you on that effort. That's quite Herculean in my take, knowing what I'm going through just launching this podcast. But Sam Spoon's Foundation is started to help defray the cost of Lyme treatment. And I suspect that has to do with your experience with Lyme and tick-borne illness. And so if you wouldn't mind, what I usually like to have my guests do is just spend a little bit of time talking about your experience with Lyme and tick-borne illness, how you got involved in this space, and we can kind of go from there, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate you having me on anytime there's an opportunity to talk about Lyme and what it does to a family. I'm always there for because I don't think people have a clue and an understanding of what can happen, not always with everybody, but can happen. I certainly was not well informed about ticks and Lyme disease and any of the other co-infections that most people don't know about. I basically was recruited by a tick because it bit my daughter. However, we were of the family that didn't get the bullseye rash. So we had no idea what was going on. And our oldest daughter was really sick. It was her junior year of high school and the wheels were falling off of her. She was a tremendous athlete and student, and every piece of her was diminishing, as the weeks went on. So, essentially, I became involved in Lyme the moment that we got the diagnosis that that's what it was. And I realized how difficult it is to treat it, how difficult it is to explain it to other people, and how difficult it is to ride a roller coaster on a regular basis with your child, especially in a marriage where you have other children that you're caring for and you are a working person. So Lyme has been that 4-letter word that has at times taken over my life, but also has changed a lot of things to make it better, which I think people find kind of crazy that I say that.
Yes. And that's really why I do this, because I want people to understand a little bit more about the experience of Lyme and tick-borne illness and really what happens to people, but that it's not all bad, that there is some good that comes out of it. And so I understand now that your daughter Sam was sick with it, and now sounds like doing much better.
Yeah.
And so did she have co-infections and stuff as well, or she just primarily had Lyme?
She had 2 strains of Lyme, which again, I was like, what do you mean 2 strains? And she had Babesia, which is a parasite. So it wasn't like another kind of, an infection. It was a different way to treat it. So those were the 2 things. And at the time, because it was end of 2014, when we found out what was going on with her, that there really weren't diagnostics in place for Babesia. That was a word that I only learned by the provider, who said clinically, of all these things going on outside of what she has with Lyme, this is what this looks like. So we're going to try to attack it this way. So it was just, pretty interesting to learn that even back then, there wasn't a very good qualified test to say this is exactly what you have.
Yeah, and I still don't know if there necessarily is. I mean, we obviously know that it's a slippery slope when you're trying to get tested for even Lyme itself, but then co-infections that people don't even know are there to look for, and just how challenging that is, and finding a lab that will do this or a doctor that will help you understand what to really look for in a person. And so it sounds like then, how long did it take for you to get a diagnosis for Sam? Was she sick for just, I hate to say just a couple of months, but we know in the Lyme world, like decades, unfortunately. But was it I mean, it sounded like it was pretty evident that her behavior was changing. So you knew that there was something drastically going wrong. And so was it pretty quick to diagnose this for her? Or again, did it take a little bit of muscle on your behalf?
So if you would have asked me this back then, I would have said, oh my gosh, it took forever. It took 8 months.
Okay.
So being in the Lyme community as long as I have been, I'm like, it only took 8 months. The way I describe it is briefer now, because we know that there are people who just go on and on, for years, and they're not getting anything but the runaround. They're just being passed off from specialist to specialist, right? So, for me at the time, the position that I was working in, I was doing a lot of different segments and stories on people in the health who were like health related things like cancer and stuff like that. So I was in front of doctors at our local UPMCs, at our Penn State Hershey. Like, I was around these doctors, and I would say, hey, by the way, so my daughter's having these symptoms and I'm not sure. So I actually just started talking about it, because I was doing this stuff like these things on a regular basis. And then I got her into a primary care physician, and she failed her first Western blot. I mean, well, let's back that up, because as we know now, the way in which you are positive for Lyme is that you have to have 5 of the 10 bands. We also know now that typically other things that are showing up are not going to show up on those bands. And so therefore you could have 3 or 4 bands and you're going to get that, oh, you are negative. So I'm certain that that's what happened with our child, because if I think about when she got sick and go back to when she probably got bit to when then she was tested, truly, she should have shown up positive. She really should have. So all in all, we went through 7 different providers in 8 months. So that tells you that I was relentless, and I was booking doctor's appointments before I even got into another doctor. So I went from neurologist, gastroenterologist, rheumatologist, another rheumatologist, primary care physician again. I can't remember. There were, I was just constantly going, and it was incredibly frustrating. And when I finally landed on the provider who not only listened, but said, this is the blood work we need to do, this is what else we need to do, and this is kind of what we think is going on with you. It was no one I would have suspected, because it was in a functional medicine doctor's office. Part of that office had chiropractic care, and I was a newbie, complete newbie to what these folks could provide outside of what I was used to in mainstream medicine. So yeah, I kind of kicked everybody else to the curb, and I plunked myself down and my daughter down in front of these functional medicine doctors. And that's how we got the ball rolling. So that was all in total about 8 months with Sam.
Okay. And then how long would you say it took her to get better, to regain her function?
So initially she started to feel better because she was on this big cocktail of antibiotics. And while she herxed, she was still like, okay, I know I'm getting better in some spaces, but I know I feel like crap. And I know I've been told that I'm going to feel bad before I feel better. So the way Sam thinks is, if I know this is going to be good for me, I can have mind over matter. I can move through this. So it's kind of like a trade-off. I feel like crap with this, but I know I'm getting better. So she thought, right? Keep in mind, she's now going into her senior year of high school. She's very forward focused on all the things that she was involved in between academics, philanthropy, and her sport. She was a real good soccer player. So a lot of things kept Sam going. And so I think she did a mind over matter that she was getting better. She was on 3,000 milligrams of antibiotics a day. And at that point too, we realized there were certain things going on that didn't match up completely with Lyme and weren't being eradicated in any way by the antibiotics. And that's when we found out she had babesia. So we kind of piled on again, but she never really felt better. It was just an exchange of symptoms. It was different. I mean, she might have lost having night sweats for a while, but then she gained like the fact that she couldn't eat around other people because she felt completely nauseous. Was it the medication? Was it the bug? Like, who knows, right? But we went through her whole senior year. She had a series of other things that happened because it really, gets in and destroys your ligaments and tendons, if not in all people, but in case of my daughter, that's what happened. And so she had to suffer through a really bad dislocated shoulder, and she had torn the labrum, and she needed surgery. So that summer she had to go through surgery. She was going into, and then she, because of the surgery and everything else going on with her, she got mono, and she landed in the hospital for 5 days. Then 2.5 weeks later, she was headed off to Penn State main campus for school to start, a brand new chapter of academics and social life and everything else. And she was about 2-3 days into school, and she said, I can't make it to my classes. This campus is huge. I need my car. So we were able to get her car up there as a freshman. And then she said, Mom, I can't walk through these parking lots either. I need a handicap placard. I need to get as close to the door as I can. So we were able to get a handicap placard. So here was this child who had already gone through over a year of antibiotics as treatment. And she was not doing well. So she muscled through her freshman first semester, came out with it was still like a 3.8 as a pre-med student, still trying to be social, living in a dorm without the ability to really cook. So it was very hard for her to change her eating. So she did the best she could, but it wasn't good. It still wasn't good at all, truly, as we know now. She was the sickest I've ever seen her. And when she came home from college, she was in bed, I would say, and sleeping 21 hours a day. And she looked awful. And not that I hadn't seen her, because she's not that far from us, like, an hour and 45 minutes. But, when she would see us, she would put some makeup on, and, she'd be trying to be up, because she's, again, the mind over matter. I didn't recognize her. She was debilitatingly sick. I mean, severely sick. And she made the decision not to go back second semester, but we weren't going to let her go back anyway. And that's when we knew that nothing that was happening before with medication or anything else was what we needed to continue doing. And we had to literally pull the plug on the entire operation of what we had been doing. And we were already 18 months in.
And so what did you do then? Did you seek a different treatment course, or God bless, like, my heart's breaking for her. I'm just thinking about young version of me and my life, and like, living it up, and you're at the height of everything, and it's such an exciting time, and what a horrible experience to have to experience any time, but let alone at that moment in your life. Mm-hmm. What do you think then ultimately helped turn things around to get her back into a better shape?
So I took her to a couple other doctors, like repeat performances of rheumatology and stuff like that. Went back into the practice where, she had been receiving all of the antibiotic care. And I said to the doctor, she's got this bad backache that won't go away. Her lower back just hurts so much. I'm going to move her, over to the chiropractor here in the office and see what we can do as far as this. Like, let's just see if that's going to help her. And that provider took a look at everything and just said, oh my God, we need an entirely new game plan. This is not okay. I mean, she had like a pocket, I could cup it, a pocket of fluid in her lower back, literally like a pocket of fluid that was squishy. Her knees, you could hardly see her kneecaps. They were squishy. She's an athlete. She's like a lean, tall athlete. It's so visible to see, where everything was settling in her. And not only that, in her brain, even though she could do her academics because she could laser focus in that moment, but if she were in her car to even drive to go to her doctor appointment or to drive to do anything, which is minimal because I told her she could hardly get out of bed. Several times she called me and was in a panic, and it's a full on panic. I don't know where I am. Mom, I don't remember where I am, and I don't know how to get home. So having said all of those things that have just, like, everything had been exacerbated now, we took her off of every single antibiotic and everything. We waited a month to get some sort of new baseline for her. new blood work baseline. What was she missing? What did we need? And that month was brutal. In that month, we decided to do the AIP diet, or the autoimmune paleo diet. And it wasn't just that, it was also looking to see what food was triggering these histamine responses or these other responses in her body. I don't like to call them allergies. It's not a food allergy, but it's how your body is responding to that food.
Yes.
She had a huge food list, like strawberries, spinach, things you would be like, oh, this is healthy food. Those things were attacking her. So we had to revamp food. So here she is, she's freaking miserable. And all she wants is comfort food when we feel like crap. Like we just want somebody. None of those things were going to apply. So we had to reprogram food. Number one, food was the first thing we did.
Okay.
And I have to say this because for people who are listening and watching, I'll say that I swear to God, that's one of the hardest things for people to understand. How do they do it? Most people are like, I can't. Either they don't have willpower, or, you know, they don't have a home where people are going to kind of respect they have these new food changes, whatever. Set yourself up for success by making sure that between your dry foods area or your pantry and your refrigerator and your counter space of the things that, you know, fruits and vegetables that you keep on the counter versus what you have in the fridge versus what you would have in your pantry to eat, put it all together as best you can in the closest wingspan as you can, and identify it, so that all you have to do is go pick that up and remove it. And you know that that's what you can have, versus seeing a sea of things, sift through what is yours to eat. But as you're sifting through, you're looking at all the things you can't have. So it's really important that you do that, because then you are able to see things in a more positive light. No, this is all the food I can have. These are all the things I can eat, as opposed to this is what I can't. So I did that, cleared out space everywhere and identified it. And I also did it with her, because it was the only thing I knew to do with her to understand. And it was like, if you're going to be miserable, I'll be miserable. We're going to do this miserable thing together. It's true. So once we did the food thing and we found that, you know, it's frustrating because you think, oh, if I eat better, I'm going to feel better soon. Nah, it's not that quick. It's just not that fast. You just have to know that it is part of the piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So what she did was she was in the chiropractor 3 days a week for adjustments, because when you're adjusting your body, you are unclogging your system so that your immune system can continue to work. Again, you can't do that standalone. You have to incorporate that with other things. So we knew that she still needed some basic supplement support before we knew all the things that she would need. So, you know, getting on things like especially glutathione, you know, stuff like that. We still stayed, you know, with that program of having some of these supplements. I actually looked into some non-invasive treatments. And the one that I fell on that I felt would be a good place to start was hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So I found a place where she could go. It was 5 days a week. And and it was an hour away. So it was an hour, well, not quite an hour, but like 45 to 50 minutes, depending on traffic, one way and back then again. So when we would get there, they would do a pulse electromagnetic field, or they call PEMF, on the mat, and lay down, and they would lay it over her eyes because of the brain fog. And then her body was laying on, you know, where the other waves would come through into her body. And they would lay her on that for about 12 minutes, and that would stimulate her red blood cells, because the red blood cells carry oxygen. And the whole thing we're doing is almost over oxygenating the body to kill off the bug and regenerate what is, you know, joints, ligaments, and things that are problematic. So, and I know you know this, I'm just saying this out loud for the people who
I love this stuff, trust me.
Yeah. So from there, she would go into, and it was the Seacrest model, which is the hospital grade model of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And that's good if you can't do 7 days a week. If you can do 7 days a week, you can get into the portable ones. But if you really are limited and you know, it's very structured because you're going to a clinic, then you're better off trying to go through getting one of those, right? So it's a 90-minute dive. And again, it's 90 minutes because you can't go 7 days a week, but you can't start the 90 minutes until you get to the dive depth of the beginning of that treatment. And what the dive depth is the compression it has on, you know, in intracellularly to get all of that oxygen in. So you got to reach what your body can tolerate. and you get to a dive depth that's more and more and more every time you dive, right? So there's 40 dives. And so that was 2 months worth of treatment, essentially 5 days a week. When she would come out of her dives, she would then go right into the far infrared sauna to really sweat out the toxins. So this was an everyday treatment. And in the beginning, I drove her there because she couldn't, she couldn't think straight. If she can't get out like 15 minutes away from the house, ain't no way she's driving that far.
Correct.
But what was really amazing was by about the 10th dive, so about 2 weeks in, into the next day or into the next dive, she said, Mom, I can do it. I can get there. I feel better. So the first thing that really changed with her was her brain fog. And that's when I feel like once you can lift your brain fog and you start to see things a little clearer, usually means you're going to sleep a little better too. So the next thing was that her sleeping improved. And then we had a very good friend lived nearby, like right up the street from us, who had a underwater treadmill.
Huh.
So one of the things you have to do is you got to get active. You got to move your body. But if you feel like crap and you can't, and your joints hurt, and you're swollen and everything, you can't. Well, again, this is my child who was an incredible soccer player. She was a track athlete as well. And she hadn't been able to hardly walk. So her first thing, when she felt like one of her goals, now this is crazy. And other people who've been through this will understand it. One of her goals was to walk down the driveway to get the mail and back, to walk with the dog up to the end of the block and come back. A goal. So she'd have these little goals and be like, oh my God, I did that. And I don't feel like I have to lay down. I mean, before she'd try to walk up the steps and she'd just sit down once or twice, just in household steps, So here she was like, I'm ready to get on the treadmill. I'm going to walk. And I went in and I would stay with her while she'd get on it and she's, doing her walk and everything. And then I watched her start to jog. And then I watched her start to run. And then she would do sprints in this treadmill. And it was like the sleeping started to get better. Now the food doesn't seem so bad because she's adapted to everything. She's down to like one chiropractic adjustment a week instead. She's on absolutely no antibiotic whatsoever, none of this. And she is also shifted into yoga. She needed something that would calm her mind because she was also working through a lot of anxiety and depression, something that would calm her mind and move her body in a way that she could learn what felt good now. Because now her body is different. It feels different. It lost a lot of muscle and movement from when she was so like sedentary for so long. It gave her mobility, it gave her spirituality, and it gave her just something new to attack that was fresh and exciting for her. And so she was able to go. She had taken some classes online, believe it or not, while she was doing all this treatment. She did great with them. And then she took classes over the summer so that by the time she went into her second year at Penn State, she was back on track. And she was learning yoga by way of taking a course that was a course of I think it was over 6 months. And it was like maybe it was 9 months because it was like one long weekend a month. And once she got her yoga training, things really exploded for her. So by the time we hit her 20th birthday, so this all started when she was 16, 19th or 20th birthday. I got to think here. 19th birthday, I guess it was. She found out that she was like eradicated. The Lyme was not present. The Babesia was not present. So that in and of itself lifted her. And I would say, so that's when it was. So it was for people to understand that it takes a combination of a lot of different things. And it takes support, like it takes a lot of support from either your family or some good friends, depending on what your age is, And it takes time, a lot of time.
Yes. Yes. And that's, I often think about the time investment. Like, I'm just listening to her story and I want to cry. Like, I'm so proud of her, and like, I'm sure that you are too. And I'm proud of you for being such a good mom and like helping her figure out what she needed to do to fix herself. And that's the hard thing sometimes to explain to people, is like, you've got to be your own best advocate. You've got to do a lot of research. You've got to invest a lot of time, unfortunately, usually. And also, I think subsequently, financially, you put out a lot of money too. And I'm just kind of curious. I think I probably know the answer, but was that covered, the hyperbaric treatments? Was that covered through insurance? Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. So not covered by insurance. A lot of people are to pay for these treatments on their own. And gratefully, God willing, you were able to find a way to do this for Sam. And I think about this with myself. Thank you, God, for, I had a lot of debt and I was really embarrassed about it for a long time, but I paid it back. And my friend's like, look, God gave you a way to fix yourself. Like, stop feeling so lowly about it. And that was a big turning point for me. But I was like embarrassed again about the debt that I incurred going through this experience. And so I think then that would probably lead to why you started your foundation, Sam Spoon's Foundation. Is that pretty much how that came to be birthed?
Yeah, I started the TikToks whenever I was the Pennsylvania ambassador for Project Lyme. So when Project Lyme was literally just taking off, I was really lucky to get to know the founder and get to know her really, really well. So I already understood the value of not just educating people, but being able to provide some financial relief, because sometimes the catalyst to getting someone well is the financial barrier. It's not that they don't want to do it and, they're not ready to do it. They don't have the money. They don't have the money. They want to do it. They don't have the money. So insurance does not cover what it needs to cover. And people are embarrassed, like you said, to reach out and ask for it. I don't understand. I mean, I get it, but it's just why we do that to ourselves. I don't understand. So anyway, after working with Project Lyme for about 2 years, I said, I live in Pennsylvania where we're number one. I don't feel right fundraising and then giving my money to another organization, even though they were doing good things with it. I felt so bad for the people of Pennsylvania who really needed the help. So yeah, I had left where I was working. And I made a big shift. I was like, I'm going to focus my time right now on getting this foundation up and running. So doesn't take, it's a lot. It's a lot to do. So don't do it unless you're ready for all of the crazy things that you gotta take care of. But I was really blessed to have a good team. And, the thing about it is that Sam was not attached to it at all. Her name was on it. And I asked her if that was okay. But she literally was, stiff arming me. I don't want to be involved in any of this. She took a long time to distance herself because it was such a traumatic event in her life. And she needed time to not be sick Sam. Because even though she had done all these other things as a well person, it was like a scarlet L on her of Lyme that she wore for such a long time. And she just didn't want any part of it. The TikTok that we did, that you came to, that's when she was finally well. And she was kind of like, I don't really want to be here, but she understood the value of it, but she didn't, because she didn't want to think about it. But Sam Spoons was born out of the fact that, and number one, Sam's spoons is because I wanted people to understand what the spoon theory was, because it's like only people who've dealt with either chronic fatigue or these autoimmune issues where you're exhausted and you have to explain away your life as to why you don't feel well or you don't have energy. The spoon theory is that metaphor for how much energy it takes to complete a simple task. And while Sam didn't always use the word, I only, spoons, she did have a different way to relate to it. But I felt like it was important for people to understand what that meant. So I always love when people are like, what's a spoon? So, we started our first year, we were able to gift $10,000 worth of grants. And to date, we are at 55,000. And I'm hoping that we're going to reach, we should reach 70,000 by this next gifting, period, which It's been hard to do through pandemic times. It's been hard to do when people start to have a lot of philanthropy fatigue, as I like to call it, but we keep pushing away, because as long as Lyme exists and we do not have a healthcare system that will help people to defray this financial burden, as long as it exists, then we're going to keep doing it. And, people will say, well, you have, like, for us, we have Four Diamonds Foundation that is tethered to Penn State Hershey Medical Center to help kids with cancer. And of course, there's St. Jude. There are all of these. Well, and then those are beautiful and they're fantastic. But how many times do you have multiple family members have cancer in one household? But you have that with Lyme. And
Yeah.
it's so sad, the amount of families who have to, take second mortgages out on their homes, or move out of their homes altogether, or decide which child gets treatment, or mom continues to suffer and is sick, but has to take care of make sure their child is okay because she feels guilty because she gave it to him in utero. Or they were sexually transmitted and mom and dad are both sick. You got to figure out which one is going to be able to get well so the other one can handle it, start to take care of the kids better. People don't understand that. So yeah, having a place where we can provide money to people to help breathe a little bit, and help that financial debt a little bit is what I want to do, because there's so much out there now that you can learn, but there's not enough people out there who can actually provide you with some relief like that.
Correct. And while we're talking about this, if listeners are interested, how would they go about donating to that cause, please?
Yeah, they can go to samspoons.org. So it's SAMSSPOONS.org. And it'll pop up right away that you can donate. You're going to learn a lot about Sam because she has a couple now they're older, but there's some videos about how she found her wellness and just see where she is, how she's doing now. And we have some other really good resources on there. There's links to being able to watch our other TikToks that we have posted in the past, but samspoons.org, or even just do /donate and it'll take you to our donation page. I thank you for letting me get that out there.
Yeah, definitely, because this is a very good cause that you're representing and heading and encouraging people to participate with, because I get it. Like I already mentioned, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt through this experience. So you're also touching on something else that I want to continue to discuss, is that it wasn't just Sam that got Lyme in your household. Now you have another child who's been infected, and not just once, but twice.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit more about Shay's experience and what's happened with her, please?
Yeah. So Shay now is 16 and a half. And it was, so she's going into 11th grade. So it was 6th grade. And it was right, after the winter, which is funny. Both of my kids, they felt like they started getting sick in the winter time. So it's not like it was, summer or spring or whatever, when we're noting, oh, the ticks are out, the ticks are out. No. My kids were late season of fall or beginning of winter. Anyway, she was extremely anxious and irritable. She was having these awful headaches, constantly going down to the nurse's office. She'd have 3 days where she would just have a fever, and that was it, just be flat out on the couch. She would go in and out of having like a limp because her either her knee would bother her or her ankle was bothering her. She had been learning to ride horses. So she was not doing anything that was like a full impact on her body or anything like that. But then she had also was learning lacrosse, and she just at some point during her first initial inaugural lacrosse season, she was doing great until her ankle would hurt her so bad. All these little things. But perhaps the biggest thing I noticed was just the lack of attention that she could give in her schooling, and the overwhelming anxiousness that she felt. I was like, this is bizarre to me. What is going on? Like, she went from being fine academically to plummeting. And like I said, like weird, and like just not so much fidgety, but just upset that she couldn't like just focus on anything. And then these headaches. So I took her to the doctor. And by the way, that would have been, let's see, February, March. So we're talking about 3 months here. I'm noticing this swirl of these symptoms, right? They come and they go, wax, wane, all that. And I take her into a primary care physician because I don't want to be that person who's like, oh, I'm sure she has Lyme. I got to take her into the functional medicine. No, I just went ahead and took her to the primary care physician about the headaches. And they're like, I think it's probably a puberty thing. She could be getting ready to get her period. She could be having some hormonal fluctuations. Let's just go through this month. When she's not well, just make sure she has Advil or Tylenol, blah, blah, blah. So basically the most vanilla you could get, right? At the tail end of that was our Easter break, and she spent 5 days on the couch with a fever. No other symptom. Not even the neck ache that Sam had. No other symptom. So I called the doctor and I was like, I need her to come back in. And it's in the back of my mind, I'm like, you've already been through knowing that I have one child that was sick with Lyme. Let me just test you and see if you're going to ask anything at all, about this.
Yeah.
The provider asked not one thing and just felt like we needed to up her Advil and ibuprofen. I left that office pissed. I called my functional medicine provider and I said, I need to get her in immediately. I am certain that she has Lyme. And they got her in, got the blood work. And within 3 weeks, because we went through medical lab diagnostics, that we found out that she had Lyme. Now, she would have been CDC positive if our provider had said, knowing your history, knowing she's around horses, knowing she's been playing lacrosse. Now, I always put stuff on her all the time. Like, she always had some sort of a repellent, everything on her. But I will say, because when she was riding horses over the winter, when she probably was bitten, she was in like head to toe, like, because she rode outside several. So it didn't occur to me, someone who was going out there and touting all this education on Sam Spoon's foundation. It didn't occur to me that at that time I still needed her to have permethrin on her socks, under her boots, and her long underwear. I mean, seriously, I would never have thought that, right?
Yeah.
Well, wrong. So anyway, she was CDC positive and lit up like a Christmas tree. So she did 6 months worth of treatment, and they hit her really, really hard, but it worked really well for her. She was then going into 7th grade, and knowing how she was reacting with everything over the summer, knowing everything that was going on with her, I said, we're going to do cyber school. That's it. I'm not dealing with this, because if she has to sleep in the morning, I'm not fighting this is why she had to sleep in because she has this, because the end of 6th grade was hell, going back and forth. The school did eventually work with us, but it was hell. Again, not at all like Sam. Sam figured out how to get to school. Sam figured out workarounds. Sam figured out all of that. This is a different kid, and a younger kid at that, and different types of symptoms. So it was a different animal altogether. And we had her on 3 months of antibiotics. I remember distinctly, she was done with her 3 months. And then there was a week. Coming into that week, I was getting ready for my 3rd TikTok, and she was not doing well by the end of that week. And by the time, no, I'm sorry, not my TikTok, another event that I have that's a fundraiser called Wine with a Splash of Lyme. I was gearing up for that. And literally the morning that that we were gearing up for this big event, was a huge event, bigger than they had been in the past years. I got more blood work back from her, and her Lyme wasn't eradicated at all. And I just remember crying, because we had done the 3 months. I thought I caught it earlier than Sam. I thought we were going to be okay, but it all came together because I was thinking that, gosh, you're right. She hasn't felt well this past week because she had just gone off the antibiotics. She is not there yet. She still has higher levels of it. We still have to continue to address this. And it broke my heart. I mean, I was so upset. So that night I had more passion in my system to have people, donate money. And I didn't say anything, because people were like, oh, Shay seems to be better. And I didn't say anything, because what was I just couldn't bring myself to say she's not. So we did another 3 months of, the pulsing of different types of antibiotics and stuff. And it was hard on her, because At that time, she hated taking pills. You had to give her like liquid of everything. It meant crushing up medicine and figuring out how to take it with a little bit of juice, or, to this day, she's not a fan of yogurt in many cases because it was crushing it up in her yogurt. I mean, it mentally took a toll on her. Um, it was awful. It was awful. It was a different awful from what I experienced with Sam, and I was coming off of PTSD from kind of getting myself used to, I can breathe again because Sam is well. She's doing great, and here we go, here we go again. And I was mad. I was really mad. So she did, in the next 3 months, eradicate the Lyme, and it was the only thing that she had. And so from what would that have been, the rest of 7th grade, and into 8th grade, of course, we came into the pandemic. That was super fun. She still stayed in cyber school, so we didn't have any other real rigors and stressors outside of what the world was experiencing. So that led us to 9th grade, and she went back into school. Of course, she's still riding her horse, doing all the things. I'm constantly applying permethrin to everything all year long, all of the time. Well, I noticed that something is not right with her. It would have been a spring a year ago. So that would have been in 22, like around the end of March, I guess it might have been. I'm noticing another spike in anxiety. I'm noticing a spike in irritability. I'm noticing some sleep patterns that are off again. I'm noticing all of this. And I just said, and it was a month. It was a month that I went through this, and I was like, well, I'm not going to make the same mistake I made last time. That's it. We're getting blood work done. And sure enough, not only did she have Lyme again, new strain, not like elevated old Lyme. This is new Lyme. And now, doggone it, she had Bartonella. And I'm sitting here going, what did I do wrong? What did I not do? What happened? I don't know. I mean, she's in the barn. She doesn't recall a tick again, no bullseye again, like Sam, no bullseye, anywhere. Bartonella, I think, probably came from could have been a tick, or it could have been a flea bite. There's cats in the barn. Could have been the saliva from the horse, because we know Bartonella is in the saliva of horses. I don't know. And it doesn't matter, because now this is what she has. So here we go again. And it was just as difficult to get her back on. And she broke. I mean, she broke down. She was devastated. And it pushed her into a really scary state, because by that summer, she was developing an eating disorder, which is common with Bartonella. She was so skinny and so thin. She was hiding the fact that she didn't want to take her medicine, because it also didn't make her feel good. So she wasn't even taking her medicine the way she should. So it created this fight in the family, everybody trying to help her and her not wanting to do it. And she's a teenager. Again, it's a different child, different circumstance, different everything. And it was brutal, just brutal. So it was a lot of therapy. It was a lot of come to Jesus. She had problems with her tendons and ligaments, and she ended up in a boot for 8 weeks and couldn't ride a horse. So that was upsetting, because that was like her happy place.
Yeah.
Again, that's from Bartonella. School was awful. Focusing, attention, sitting down that length of time, it hurt. She's in a big school, walking up and down, getting from place to place, being exhausted, needing to take a nap. The school worked with us, but it was because I was constantly involved. She ended up being able to have an IEP that would help her with instruction and everything. And, again, unlike Sam, who somehow was able to focus on her academics, it was like, thank God you passed, and thank God that you were able to just have average grades, because that's the best that we could do. And that was fine. I mean, it was just fine.
Yeah.
So it was another hell year for her. Socially, it was hellish, because you can't go, she didn't want to go out and do things because she was dealing with anxiety. or she didn't know how to say, I need to leave, I'm exhausted, or can't do a sleepover. Don't forget to take all your supplements. Don't forget you can't eat this, that, and the other thing. I mean, it was just awful. It's awful, 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 awful. So that was in and of itself a really, really trying time. She now looks so much better. She is doing so much better. The Lyme is no longer present and has been, and it's been low for some time now. Or like I should say, it was low for a while, and now it's not showing up. So it's the old IgG. And now we're waiting to see what the Bartonella level is. It was low, then it went higher again, and then it went low, and we don't know where it is. Waiting on that blood work to come back. But clinically, she is so much better. She has put, the weight on that she needed to. She's still a tall, thin girl, but, her body feels better. She is social. She hasn't lost her, like she had no affect. She was flat affect for so long. She's back to being her. She's social. She's got her driver's license. Looking forward to school as much as a teenager can. She's accelerated with her riding. So she did really well at her last horse show and won, which was,
yes.
she maintain it. She could actually continue to do it and not be exhausted and tired. So right now, there's a lot of good things, that have come of it. And anytime these kids go through something this young, they have to learn something from it, and they become resilient in all ways, and they mature faster than you would want your kids to. But, that's definitely something that Shay has learned. She's learned a lot about herself and how she can push herself. Also, she has learned how her body feels and how to respond to it and what it needs and what it shouldn't have. So at 16 and a half, she's probably farther along than many kids. And again, this is the age that Shay, excuse me, can't remember my kids. Sam was really getting sick.
Okay.
So I look at her now and I'm thinking, all she's been through in this short amount of time.
Yes. Yes.
I busted through the door. See me. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And it's wild to think about that. Like I learned that in my late 30s, 40s, right? Like what they're experiencing. And it's like completely changed my life for the better in so many ways and set me up for success so much better and given me such greater understanding and empathy. And I think about, I'm so glad that they got better. First of all, it's funny. I deal a lot more with grownups that have Lyme and tick-borne illness. I don't deal with kids a lot, but it hurts even further just to hear what they've gone through, because I know what I went through myself as a grown-up and like trying to talk myself through it and get the energy up and do whatever to motivate and go and to make all the changes that you have to do with diet, et cetera. And so for a young person to have to do that is just harrowing. And again, I'm just really glad that they were able to find their way back to health. And I'm so glad that they have you as such a good advocate again. And really it's like, what do we do about the rest of the population in a sense that doesn't have that wherewithal or the abilities or the strength or the whatnot to pull themselves through? And I think by sharing your experience, like what you're doing, is a really good start to helping other people figure out that they've got to do this work themselves too. And I feel like a lot of times people are waiting for the doctor to help them, and we would like to think that we can, but we know that not all of them know enough or are educated well enough or are specialist enough to guide somebody successfully through this. And it's really important to find a doctor who can support you and has specialties in this area and can help you to go through the journey to wellness again. But it does come back to the individual themselves ultimately in the end.
Yeah, it does. And like I said, it depends on the age of your child, and it depends on the personality of your child. Sam was older. She was, started really at 16, and she just had she has a different approach to something, a different approach to a challenge. She dives in. What do I need to do? I'm going to beat this. That's her competitive nature, if you will. That's who she is. So she blows me away every day when I know what she has been through and how she continues to elevate herself. That's not for anybody else but for her, but she doesn't realize how much that benefits so many people who know her story. And Shay is another testament, because on the other side, Shay is what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to educate educators on invisible illness. I want them to understand how many children are walking around with invisible illness, because we can rally around a kid all day long who is going through cancer.
Yes.
We visually see it. We know, or some other, type of disability. We see it, but you do not see it. Like she would be, Shay, when she had her boot on, there were days that she'd be like, my foot feels really good. I'm going to walk around. And then she'd have to put the boot back on and, need to then ride the elevator or something so she isn't going up down the steps. And her friends would be like, oh, you're just, you're like faking it so you could get this kind of mentality. Or she would be fine and go to school, and then the next day not be able to go to school. The teachers are like, we don't, like, what's wrong? And the amount of times that I had to say, let me repeat, this is what's going on. Let me remind you, this is what's happening. And, as you had stated at the beginning of the podcast, I too am a podcaster. I had her on the podcast because she said, I would like to come on the podcast and talk about what it's like to be in school and have an invisible illness. And I want to share my story. And I thought that took a lot for her to do that. It's very brave, to put yourself out like that and be that vulnerable. But, learning from what Sam went through, what I extracted from her is, if you are able to dive all in and you tell yourself you can do this and you dive all in, you can make it happen. There is hope. You can get better. You might not be great, but you can get better. And if anything else, you can learn to see the positives of the things that are challenging you both mentally and physically. And that's something that Sam has shown me time and time again. And her success has just been phenomenal. She's in chiropractic school now. She has several more training levels of yoga. She's a beautiful yoga instructor. She is constantly pushing her own self. She's gotten so strong. If anybody wants to follow Sam Perry 7, I think is what she goes by on Instagram, or I think you can actually follow it if you go to samspoons.org. You can follow where Sam is. Follow her and see what she is doing. Her journey is super cool. And she's very open for any young people or parents out there who just want to kind of pick her brain or ask her how she came through and what she did, what was the secret to her sauce. You can reach out to Sam. You can go actually even to info@samspoons.org. Send me the email. How do I connect with Sam? Because she is now more open as time has passed to be appreciative of her journey and understand that people benefit from her story. So she's not hiding it anymore. She's out there talking about it when she's asked about it. Another podcast that we were on is Tick Boot Camp. Anybody, whoever follows them as well, pull up that. It was Sam and I talking about her journey. And she has, oh gosh, she's so beautiful in the way that she says things and describes things. And she's intelligent. Adults can learn from her, And then from Shay, one of the things that I want to talk with Shay about, because I think she kind of got in the shadow of Sam Spoons, because everything's about Sam. And she's like, I had an experience too. And I want to honor that by giving her a voice so that when she is able to articulate what she feels educators should learn about invisible illness, I want to be there to facilitate either the conversation or whatever she drafts to put together, to put that out in front of people, and probably start just at our school district. Because there were people who were amazing and helpful, but I think parents and students alike should learn what all of this means, the steps that parents can take, but what students need to understand about respecting and having just empathy for young people who are going through this. And eventually what I want to do is also provide a scholarship in the name of both of my girls. Because, Shay's going into her junior year. So I'd like to have a scholarship, and the recipients of the scholarship have to have gone through something that is of an invisible illness, and something that is of nature where they had to be incredibly brave, resilient, tough, and they had to figure out how to address that. It's very difficult to explain to people, what is going on with me, and still be a student, and still try to be social, and still try to grow as a person. All these things that matters. That means a lot. And I would like to put that out there. So maybe even in the act of having a scholarship, it creates that conversation. So people will be like, what is the scholarship about? Well, this is what it means. This is what it means.
Yeah. Wow. Again, I'm like getting ready to cry. Like, what beautiful gift that you're giving back to our community through your experience and through the pain and everything else that you've gone through, to come out and still see solutions and ways to fix this and to make this better for other people is just amazing. And your energy and just everything that you stand for and represent is so beautiful. So truly, thank you. And I'm excited to follow along and see. I didn't necessarily realize you could follow Sam like that. And I know you had mentioned to me she'll be willing to be a participant on the podcast
Yes.
soon. So for listeners, do watch in the next couple months. We're going to have Sam on here as well, so she can relate her story from her perspective. But this has been so great for me, Carrie, because I usually, again, interview the people who have Lyme and tick-borne illness. It's not very often, in a sense, that I get to talk to people who have walked a journey and experienced it for someone else, and seeing it through your eyes and how it's impacted you. And again, your ability to then share this experience with others to help others learn, again, more from the outside perspective, looking in and not maybe so much actually going through the experience, but how to help people be more supportive and understanding, because that's huge. It is not something that makes sense. And it's not like cancer where you have your sickness for 6 months and you go through your chemo and this and that, and then you're better. And like, you might have good days and bad days through there, but I feel like with Lyme, it is a lot more good days and bad days. It fluctuates so much more, and you never really know what you're going to get. You could wake up and feel totally fine, and then 3 hours later you feel terrible, and people don't get that. And it's hard for people to remember or to have that empathy, I think, in particular when it comes to the invisible illness spectrum. So thank you for all of your passion and for what you do, again, for our community, just to make people more aware and to teach and to share. And again, you touched me 4 or 5 years ago. I've never forgotten meeting you for the first time, and just that's always stuck with me. And just knowing that there's such good people out there doing such great things, like you yourself are a huge inspiration, let alone your girls who have battled this and coming out the other side. And to see Sam's career and where that goes, I'm kind of curious to see what happens with Shay and what she winds up doing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, if she'll kind of come into this area as well. And again, just thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your willingness to share and teach and to be here with us. If you wouldn't mind, I think as the last question, you've shared so much great information, but if you wouldn't mind, please tell me, what do you think is, because again, it's not all bad that happens. What is one of the best things that's happened to you through your experience of tick-borne illness?
Yeah, I think that when you are faced with something like this, that is, it's very hard when you're out with others and community who don't know you, don't know what you're going through. We don't have the same type of rallying mentality that we do, like I said, in cancers and things like that. So it's a very invisible, it's a very alone illness, and it forces you to be introspective. It forces you to rely on yourself and the close circle of people who are supporting you. And in that, you really can grow. You don't have to be stuck in a woe is me mentality, because there's no way that someone going through this did not learn something super important, super special in the process. So I think that just on its face, we learned a lot about food, and we learned about the value of eating the right food to fuel the body. We also have learned a lot about how to listen to your body and understand what it needs, whether it's the common cold, it's the whatever. What are some of the natural things that we can do? So I never would have understood that stuff if I hadn't gone through this process. But I also think that you learn how to not just be resilient. We are faced with a lot of that in life, in a lot of different ways, but to really unpack all the unnecessary BS that you just don't need in your life, be it toxic people or toxic things that you're doing, and narrow your focus to what makes you happy, what brings you joy. What are the simple things when you're sick? And when I watch my children being sick and they don't have the ability to go out and go and do, we're finding something that is simple that brings you joy and gratitude in that moment. What can you find that's good? what's around you that you can use in that moment to fuel you and inspire you. Those things are always there. And be around the right people. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have times of, being with acquaintances and all this, whatever, but make your circle so important and so precious to you that it is part of your toolbox of always having a place to fall with people when you're not doing great. Because look, even Sam, they have moments, where there's some fragility there. I don't feel well. I think I'm coming down with something. And you revert to this scare place that you were in when you were only in your bed and where you were only on the couch. And those things still happen. And you have to have a space where you can breathe through it and people. So the end net of this is you really become close to finding out who you are, who you really are as a person, what you want, what are your strong desires, how you fuel your body and take care of yourself, and who are the people that are always going to be around you, stick with you, and they help you. They help you move past those difficult times. So they're always there. Anybody who's not feeling hopeful and they're sitting back there going, "Oh, sure, Carrie, I haven't been able to get into the right doctor. I don't feel well about this. I don't feel great about this." Take a minute, close your eyes, meditate, put your hand on your heart, breathe. If you're a Christian or a God-loving person, ask. Ask to be an open vessel to receive the information that you need, and breathe. Take a moment. It's going to be there. It's going to be okay. And there's people like me and you, and we're here for you. There's goodness in the world despite all of this, and there are ways to get better. And that's the hope I want people to know. My children are living proof of it, and there are a lot of people who are living proof of it. Do not give up. Yep, there you go. Everybody's journey is different, but there's something beautiful to behold in all of it.
Yes, thank you. That's a very beautiful summation in a sense, and I am just grateful for your wisdom and insight again, because these words will find the right people and they're going to hear that and they're going to know that there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and sometimes it might take decades, unfortunately, to get there, but just don't give up and keep going. And you have to just put one foot after the next. That was always my mantra when I was so sick. It was hard just to even take the next step. Yep. I'd literally say to myself, okay, and just pick your foot up and put it in front of the next one. You can do this. And you just got to start rolling the ball and keep going and believing in yourself and know that radical healing is possible and it does exist. You have two good examples of it, as do I. And so I'm grateful again for your time here. Thank you.
So welcome. It was so great to be on this podcast. And I really appreciate you giving me the voice and another platform to be able to share what's happened with our family.
Yes, it's important. So again, thank you for your vulnerability, and I look forward to sharing this with everybody.
Thanks.
Yes, take care. Thanks, Carrie.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.